city.
They said it was next to.
Good morning, everyone. The committee will come to order. We are here this morning to discuss the President's budget request for the Department of Energy for fiscal year 2020. Mr. Secretary, it is good to have you back in front of the committee again. We appreciate it. It seems like it's been a really quick year, at least maybe for me. I would imagine for you as well. So we're back with a conversation again about the budget. In looking at the budget, actually many parts of this look familiar to where we were last year. I am pleased to see the President's budget seeks to increase funding to address vulnerabilities in our electric infrastructure. Ensuring the cybersecurity and resiliency of our nation's grid is really a top priority for many of us here on this committee, so it's good to see your priorities here as well. These issues also fall squarely in our jurisdiction, which is why we've devoted significant time to these challenges, including in the area of electromagnetic pulses and geomagnetic disturbances. So again, it's good to see the department focus so keenly on them. Well, I do appreciate many parts of this budget. There are other parts that I will disagree with. It seems like we always get to the disagreeing part of it rather than the things that we do agree on. But there are significant areas. Your focus on national labs, on the advanced nuclear, on the exascale computing, the quantum information science. These are all matters that have come before our committee that we've enjoyed some success in moving them out, moving legislation out. So these are certainly areas of support. But we've been also talking a lot in this committee this year about the issues of climate, what we can be doing to reduce emissions more broadly, what we can do to enhance our efficiencies, to reduce costs for power generation, and really just be better environmental stewards. So I think as we talk about those opportunities moving forward, and we had a chance in the Appropriations, Energy, and Water Subcommittee last week with Chairman Alexander, who chairs that Approach Subcommittee, talking about his Manhattan challenge for us, if you will. But so much of what he has outlined in terms of ways that we can make an impact really lies squarely within the Department of Energy. So it is somewhat disappointing to see the budget request again putting programs that promote energy innovation and cutting-edge science on the chopping block. I know many of my colleagues share the disappointment in the request to eliminate ARPA-E, a program that brings the private sector together with the national laboratories and the universities to bridge the valley of death for emerging energy technologies. Your budget request also eliminates both the Weatherization Assistance Program and the state energy programs. And I'll get a little parochial here because these are so important to a state like mine. I do appreciate the efforts of the department to work with Alaska Native villages so that they and tribes across the country can access the Tribal Energy Loan Guarantee Program, but I'm troubled that the budget request proposes to eliminate that program just as it's now getting off the ground. And these are the types of programs that help Alaskans as they are addressing the high energy prices, really the highest energy prices in the nation. And Mr. Secretary, when you were with me in the state, when we had an opportunity to go to Kodiak and to Old Harbor, you saw firsthand how these challenges that we face, I think, challenge us to be more innovative and to seize on some of the innovation opportunities that we're working to advance. You saw an electric grid powered by nearly 100% renewable energy in Kodiak, and then you saw the first stages of small hydro there at Old Harbor. And these are not only part of Alaskans' effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, they also reduce the high cost of diesel fuel, which again you saw firsthand. so that residents can stay in their communities and open up new economic opportunities. And it's communities like these spread all over our country that stand by ready to innovate and transition to a cleaner energy future. But they need our help, and they need the help of the Department of Energy. Programs like those proposed for elimination and offices like the Office of Indian Energy are vital to our future and our ability to move forward. We all know that we need to make responsible cuts to the budget, but we don't want to forget the critical role that innovation plays for us in helping to create jobs, boost economic growth, increase competitiveness, and strengthen our long-term security. So upon initial review and without all the details of the budget, I do have some concerns about the proposals. I've outlined a couple, but I also recognize that this is a starting place. This is where we begin the conversation about your priorities, about the President's priorities, and the priorities of those of us here. And that from here, it's incumbent on all of us to seek that common ground and areas for compromise. So I look forward to our discussion and then moving forward after this. And again, Mr. Secretary, I appreciate a great deal your leadership and being here this morning. Senator Manchin.
Madam Chairman, thank you again for gathering our committee today for this important hearing. And I want to welcome my friend, Secretary Perry. He and I have worked together a long time, back in our good old days as being governor, and it's a pleasure to welcome you in your third presentation, hearing before the Committee on Secretary of Energy, which I'm understanding you consider your coolest job. Well, I'm happy to continue working with you in what I consider a new cool role as a ranking member, so it's going to be exciting. The energy sector is undergoing rapid change. The natural gas revolution is still going strong, and the grid is getting cleaner and more efficient. And every day, we have new cyber and resilient challenges to tackle. And the conversation around climate change is center stage, a conversation that we here, myself and the chairwoman, hasn't shied away from in this committee. But when I looked at the administration's budget request, I was disappointed to see numbers that neither reflect the purported priorities of the department nor get us where we need to go in order to tackle carbon emissions. Looking at the top line, the budget request proposes cutting non-national nuclear security administration funding to the Department of Energy by over 25%. I think this proposal would limit the DOE in a number of critical ways, including its ability to maintain a global leadership role in the research and development. In my view, the United States, as a leader in energy production, has a unique and necessary role to play in developing and commercializing innovative technology solutions for the climate problems that we're facing globally. The International Energy Agency, or the IEA as we know it, reported earlier this week that globally, energy demand grew by 2.3% over the past year, and fossil fuels met a lot of that demand and will continue to for some time. And that's going to be the story for the next few decades, in part because the average coal plant in Asia is only 12 years old. The fact is that fossil fuels, including coal, will continue to be part of our energy mix. And if we can agree on that, it's clear as day to me that the United States needs to put its money where its mouth is, in advanced solutions like carbon capture, storage, and sequestration. It's what the experts are saying also. Dr. Biro of the IEA told the committee just last month that CCUS may be the most critical technology that we can invest in. We need a moonshot when it comes to carbon capture, so I'm working on legislation that will refocus the DOE on coal and natural gas RD&D. My hope is that between the brilliant minds at your DOE and our national labs in the private sector, we can crack this nut sooner than later. I think we can all agree that this kind of innovation is necessary to ensure economic competitiveness, environmental responsibility, energy security, and national security. In addition, we need to keep up the good work at the Advanced Research Projects Agency. Energy, or ARPA-E, which is another critical part of ensuring U.S. leadership in advanced energy technologies, is a tech race with China. Then there's the Loan Program Office, which I'm very much concerned about, a program with high repayment rate and that has made money for taxpayers. It is a perfect tool to promote public-private partnerships for innovative energy technologies, especially advanced fossil technology. I was very disappointed to see proposals to eliminate both of these valuable programs, when right now we need to be fostering them. On the other hand, I was pleased to see that the budget request included a significant 30% increase in funding for the Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, Emergency Responses, or CSAR for short. Our folks at NETO in West Virginia are responsible for managing about a third of that funding, and I'm also optimistic about what we can accomplish together this year on some of the tougher issues, like nuclear waste storage and disposition. I look forward to working with you at the DOE and Chairwoman Murkowski and our appropriations colleagues on that. And I was also encouraged to hear that in your appropriations hearing last week, you expressed willingness to work with Senator Alexander on the R&D goals. I share his desire to increase funding and focus on the department on those technologies that will achieve emission reductions. I will introduce R&D legislation of my own in the coming days, and I look forward to working with you as well as Senators Alexander, Chairwoman Murkowski, and my other colleagues to get that across the finish line. I know that you share my desire to get the funding for DOE right, and I look forward to working with you on that. So with that, Secretary Perry, thank you for joining us today and for all you do, DOE, and for our country, and I look forward to hearing for your presentation.
Thank you, Senator Manchin. Secretary Perry, it's indeed a pleasure to have you back before the committee. We welcome your comments this morning and the opportunity to engage in a little bit of back and forth about this budget. So you may proceed.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Ranking Member Manchin and members of the committee. It's an honor to appear before you today to discuss the President's FY 2020 budget request for the Department of Energy. Continues to be a great privilege and an honor to serve as the 14th Secretary of Energy. It's a very exciting time to be at the helm of the DOE. I look forward to working with each of you on passing a budget that invests in the nation's priorities in energy and science, national security, while at the same time continuing our shared support of innovations that have led to America's world-leading, yet often overlooked, progress in reducing energy-related emissions. When I appeared before the committee last year, I committed to rebuild and restore our nation's security, to protect our critical electric grid and energy infrastructure from cyber threats in particular, to improve the resilience and reliability of the nation's electricity system, to continue to seek a federal disposal solution for the nation's nuclear waste, to invest in early-stage, cutting-edge research and development, and to advance our leadership in exascale and quantum computing. I'm proud to report to you that since then, DOE has advanced each of those goals. This budget request of $31.7 billion seeks to build upon that great progress by making strategic investments that yield the best return on investment for taxpayers that benefit our country in the years to come. This budget is a request by the American people through you, their representatives in Congress, to secure America's future through energy independence, scientific innovation, and national security. As such, it represents a commitment from all of us at DOE to honor the trust of our citizens with increased stewardship, accountability, commitment to excellence. This request supports the Department's vast mission in a fiscally responsible way. It makes clear that success will be measured not by the dollars spent, but by the results achieved on behalf of the American people. By investing in reliable, affordable energy, transformative innovation, and national security, we're approaching the dawn of what I call the new American energy era, a time of energy abundance, security, and yes, I will say even independence. American energy independence, it used to be a soundbite, but thanks to innovation, today it is a reality. The Department's world-leading science and technology enterprise generates the innovations we need to fulfill our mission. And through support of our cutting-edge research at our 17 national labs, and I might add over 300 universities, many of them, or I should say a number of them in your home states, We are expanding the frontiers of scientific knowledge and accelerating the pace of discovery to address our greatest challenges. This past fall, I fulfilled a commitment to visit all 17 of our national labs and get to witness firsthand the brilliant work that's performed by these dedicated individuals. And these labs have a rich history of science and innovation, and together they have bettered countless lives around the globe. I'm especially proud of the work the labs are doing in collaboration with others to harness the power of our world-class supercomputers to maintain America's leadership in high-performance computing, advanced exascale computing, and push for breakthroughs in artificial intelligence. To do so, this budget proposes investments in early-stage research and development that will focus the intellectual prowess of our scientists and engineers on the development of technologies that the private sector can convert into commercialized applications to improve the lives and the security of all Americans. This budget also requests significant funding to modernize the nuclear security enterprise, further our non-proliferation efforts, propel our nuclear navy at sea, as well as simply to power the fleet of the future. As we work to include America's nuclear energy industry in our all-of-the-above strategy, we see great promise in next-generation advanced reactor technologies. In the coming weeks and months, I look forward to working with you, your colleagues, and excellent staff here in Congress on the specific programs mentioned in the testimony and throughout the department. Congress has an important role in the path forward. I met with many of you already. I look forward to deepening our partnership for the benefit of the people that we serve. On a final note, I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to both of you in particular and the committee as a whole for approving our 4 remaining nominees. Our Senate confirmed key positions of leadership, nuclear energy, Office of Science, ARPA-E, and my general counsel. Thank you. I never thought I'd be sitting in front of a committee saying thank you for getting me a lawyer. But after 2.5 years without a lawyer, it's thank you very much for doing that. So anyway, I look forward to working with you in this new, I said this earlier, this new American energy era. And you have my pledge that at DOE, we're going to continue to run the place efficiently, effectively, and to accomplish our mission-driven goals of advancing energy security, economic security, and national security for the American people. So with that, Madam Chair, thank you for your time and your partnership as we go forward. And certainly, Joe, thank you, Governor, for your old friendship, and look forward to continuing our work together. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, thank you. So I know members have a host of different questions, so let me begin by asking a question that I raise in every committee that I'm privileged to serve on when I have a member of the cabinet in front of us. And this is the issue of the Arctic, because we recognize, perhaps not every day, but I certainly recognize that we are an Arctic nation. We're an Arctic nation because of my state, but this is not Alaska earmarks. This is not just Alaska we're talking about. We're talking about the role that the United States of America plays with its other Arctic partners, whether it is on issues of environment or research or development or indigenous peoples or defense. This is a significant part of the globe, and I'm trying to make sure that from the government perspective, we recognize that there is a role there. As you know, we had previously within the department an Arctic Energy Office. We, in the Appropriations Committee, certainly moved to help advance that last year. My hope would be that that is something that within the department there is some recognition or consideration of reopening that Department of Arctic Energy office. We know that it's not just one office, though, that can constitute a policy initiative. When you were up in the state, and again, I thank you for the visit that you made, but shortly after you left, we had a conference at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. We hosted the National Lab Day. We had many of the directors of our national labs, and it was a great reminder of the collaboration that goes on with our labs and our universities. That's certainly one way that we can help to facilitate and do more when it comes to shining the light on Arctic issues. I raised last week at the appropriations hearing the fact that we have only 2 Indian Energy Office employees in the whole state of Alaska. We'd like you to take a look at that. But can you give me, from the perspective of the Department of Energy, how you are prioritizing or recognizing the role that we play in the Arctic?
Senator, thank you. I think it's important to come and to put boots on the ground, so to speak, to be there to see what all is going on in a particular part of the country. Being from the relatively tropical part of the United States, and my history being in Texas and what have you, although I had been to Alaska a number of times, both as an Energy Committee member back as a State House member, to be there with you, to go not only up on the North Slope, but also to go into the community of Old Harbor and sit and talk to the Burns family about the challenges that they have there, and recognize that the United States is an Arctic nation. And I think that's sometimes very important for us to recognize that the United States is an Arctic nation. So the commitment to that region, and to recognize the valuable resources that are encompassed in that area, and the unique challenges that has. Kevin Foster, who runs our Office of Indian Affairs, is very, very familiar with that area, and let's expand the conversation about the office up there and the personnel side of it. But I want to make sure that the people of Alaska know that, number one, we understand the challenges and the uniqueness of it, but there are a lot of pieces of this puzzle, if you will. The architecture of Arctic is and is part of the DOE's mission. So, developing those resources, the rare earth minerals that are in that area, and the innovation. You and I have talked about advanced reactors and how they can play a unique role, up to and including micro reactors out on the Adak Peninsula for some defense needs out there, and frankly for some of the private sector needs as well. We're going to assure you that the department, through its partners and its activities, will continue using those Arctic energy resources in a very productive way. Nettles Arctic Energy Office is going to continue to coordinate with academia and other government agencies to demonstrate the value of Alaska's fossil fuel resources, as well as hopefully some of our nuclear. Obviously, what you're doing on wind that we saw on the battery storage side of this. And I will just make mention that I think in the last 2 years, this country has increased its solar energy production by 90%. So, and all of the above strategy, of which the Arctic is going to play an important role, is not lost on us.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'd welcome further conversations about the specifics, and again, my continued interest in an Arctic energy office, recognizing that this goes far beyond just Alaska. But I know that you have been invited, certainly by the Arctic Circle Assembly. This is an annual gathering in Iceland of those that are interested in all things Arctic. But for you to speak to the level of innovation, it's a conference that I have attended on numerous occasions. I believe Senator King has joined as well, but something that you might want to consider. So I'll look forward to further discussions on that. Let's go to Senator Manchin.
Madam Chairman, I'm going to defer to Senator Stabenow, who has another pressing committee meeting.
Well, I appreciate the courtesy of my colleague and leader, and thank you to both of you, and welcome, Secretary Perry. This is the third time you've been before the committee in terms of the budget, and while it's good to see you, I have to say that while you're talking about new American energy era, unfortunately, what I see in the energy budget is a budget that guts programs that support American ingenuity and our global preeminence in fields like advanced manufacturing, clean vehicle and energy technologies, and cutting-edge research. And I will say the exception to that, and I want to thank you for your continued support, because this budget does include funding for what we call the FRIB project at Michigan State University, which I've talked to you about a number of times, the facility for rare isotope beams, which will be the world's most powerful radioactive beam facility and will advance new defense, environmental, and medical technology. So I'm very appreciative that this project is continuing and the support is in here for that. But frankly, when I look at the rest of the budget, it's very concerning to me. I know that you've said this is a starting point for discussion, and that you're committed to working with us, but the budget is a clear statement about what the administration does and doesn't prioritize. And so what we have is an overwhelmingly prioritized budget on fossil fuels at the cost of clean energy and advancing vehicle technologies, domestic manufacturing. When you look at the budget calling for the repeal of the tax incentives for electric vehicles, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. I'm really glad Senator Lamar Alexander and I are putting in the bill in the next few days that would actually extend the cap so that we could have more consumer tax credits for electric vehicles. This budget does away with that. You cut the Office of Energy Efficiency, renewable energy by 86%, advanced manufacturing by 75%, vehicle technologies by 79%, eliminate ARPA-E that you talked about earlier, Title 17, the Advanced Vehicle Loan Program, I mean, just on and on and on, and yet renewable energy is the fastest growing source of U.S. electricity, and the future of transportation, as we know, is in electric and alternative fuels, which we need to be working with the industry, the private sector, to be able to help them to be able to get there. And then finally, I have to underscore that we have the disastrous effects of carbon pollution right in front of our face every single day now, the atmosphere heating up as a result of carbon pollution, and what is happening in the swings in snow and rain and drought and wind and fires. In fact, we are now working on the floor on a disaster package that is a result of not tackling carbon pollution. So while I come from a state I'm very proud to say that really led the Industrial Revolution, and we certainly benefited from the power of fossil fuels, we better be paying attention now to what is happening here, or our kids or grandkids, frankly, are going to never forgive us for what is going on. So given the clear market trends, as well as what's happening here all around us, the science says we have 12 years to curb our emissions to avoid catastrophic global warming, and the significant investments of our global competitors in clean energy, led by China. Why then is this administration proposing to do the exact opposite, really take us backwards? I appreciate what you said, but the budget takes us backwards. And how will this benefit us going forward with what we need to do in terms of jobs, clean energy, and tackling carbon pollution?
Senator, absolutely. One of the things that I talk about on a fairly regular basis is the progress that the United States is making when you look at the emission side of it. And I want to address directly your question about advanced manufacturing and what we're doing at Oak Ridge and the work we're doing there. As a matter of fact, I think it was last year, I drove up and down Independence Avenue in a vehicle that was made out of carbon fiber that was hydrogen fueled, and that's the type of work that's coming out of our national labs.
But it's all due respect, I just want to say, I know that that's great, but you're not supporting the consumer tax credits to be able to allow people to purchase those vehicles until we get to a point where there's enough volume that the price comes down so that people can purchase. And that is my concern, because I agree with you. There's incredible technologies that are going on,
right,
but the capacity to support their integration into the economy and for consumers having access is my concern.
Yep. Well, and again, one of the things that I will share with you, as I did the last 2 times I was in front of this committee, is the good news for me is I was an appropriator once upon a time, and I've been a chief executive, and I humorously say that my budget generally ended up as a pretty good doorstop when I was the governor of Texas, and I'm not making any comparables here. I'm just saying that I understand how this process works, and we're here to work with you, the members of this committee, to come up with a budget that prioritizes what's important. And we can quibble about maybe what the amounts are, but I think we do share we have a shared interest in not only American technology leading and being sent around the world, whether it's carbon capture utilization technology that could go to China and into India to start making some real progress, American LNG into the European to push away from older, inefficient, dirtier burning power plants. That's the type of progress that we've seen in the United States. We've had the greatest reduction in emissions in this country in history, according to the IEA. So I think we're headed in the right direction. Are we going as fast as some people want us to? Probably not. But the DOE and our continued innovation and our national lab, Senator, I think are going to play a very important role as we go forward in that. And we'll commit, obviously, to continue to work with you to find the ways that American technology, American innovation, American vehicles are leading that charge to address the issue of emissions and obviously creating good paying jobs in the United States.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would just say I think this budget would make a good doorstop. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Senator Cassidy, please.
Hey, Mr. Secretary. Dr. Burrell, the IEA director, testified before the committee a few weeks ago telling us that carbon capture, utilization, and storage is the most critical technology we can do to lower our emissions, aside from maybe the continued use of more natural gas and renewables. And you've been committed to that. I appreciate that. But I guess as we're looking at this kind of nexus, if we're looking at carbon capture, utilization, and storage, I think most of the research has been with coal, and yet natural gas is an increasing amount of our feedstock for our grid. So to what degree is the research being done on CCUS being directed towards the increased use of natural gas on our grid?
Okay. Senator, we got a couple of, just to be really specific, we got a couple of funding opportunities here, about $60 million, $30 million of that from some front-end engineering and design on carbon capture systems, and then we've got a FOA that's out at this particular point in time for the same amount, $30 million, to continue the carbon storage assurance facility enterprise. And one of the first projects I went to not only observe, but to officially open as the Secretary of Energy, was just outside of Houston, a Petronova project. It was coal. It was a coal plant, taking 95% of the emissions out, and then taking those emissions, shipping them some 75 miles away to a crude oil field where it was used for tertiary recovery, and had a pretty massive effect on that oil field. So the stories that are out there and the real life examples of this, I think have a great role to play, not just in the United States, but particularly getting outside of the U.S.
So I agree with that, but what I understand is that, for example, the oxygen content of natural gas emissions is higher. So that presents a different issue than if it's just coal. And that since the BTU per carbon footprint is so much better with natural gas than coal, that you actually have less CO2 being spun off, so that in itself presents challenges.
Correct.
And so to what degree is the research, and yet we've seen that the percent of feedstock that natural gas represents in terms of generating electricity continues to climb. So I guess my question is, to what degree is the research being promoted by the Department of Energy recognizing that natural gas has its unique issues and that it is an increasing amount of the grid, so therefore the research needs to be specific for the natural gas product, if you will?
Senator, let me get back with you with any specificity about what the department's doing on the specific issue of which you ask about on natural gas.
I'm good with that.
Great.
Next, let's talk about SPR, Strategic Petroleum Reserve.
Yes, sir.
Just your thoughts. Obviously, we have increased production in the United States, and we still have this large storage of oil. What are your thoughts, since we are producing so much more, as to the continued need of and long-term outlook for the SPR?
Yep. Senator, I think it's really a timely discussion to have about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. As everyone around the table, and hopefully most of the public knows, it was created right after the after the mid-'70s and the oil and gas crisis that we had in that period of time. It was put in place not only as a national security issue, but as a reserve in case of a major national disaster. We've tapped into it a number of times, our states having had hurricanes, certainly after Sandy, and having a national petroleum reserve, a strategic petroleum reserve, makes sense. Now, the world has changed in the last 42 years since it was created. Number one, the United States now is the #1 oil and gas producing country in the world. Do we need that big of a reserve, particularly with the growth of the pipeline infrastructure that we have and the growth in that infrastructure that's going to occur over the next decade? I mean, we're going to see massive amounts of pipelines being built around the country that can be part of a reserve. We have a requirement internationally to keep a certain amount of crude available for our international partners, but I think you're absolutely correct in having a public dialogue about this. Is the SPRO the right size? Can we contract it? Can you rent part of it out to the private sector for storage? I mean, I think all of this is an appropriate. It's time to renew this, the focus on this, and potentially, certainly leave it up to you members of Congress, but I think you'll get it right. But it's time to have this conversation about, do we need to modernize the Strategic Petroleum Reserve? I'm
out of time, but I will say that I've been interested as well in the benefit to the federal taxpayer of leasing out some of that excess space.
Yes, sir.
It would save a lot of future development, but I yield back. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. And I know that certainly in this committee, we focused on the need for that modernization to make sure that it was able to do what we expected and anticipated. I'm trying to remember when we got that report, but thanks for bringing that question up. Senator Manchin.
Madam Chairman, I also defer to Senator Hirono, who has another pressing meeting.
Thank you very much, Senator Manchin. Mr. Secretary, it's not unexpected that an administration that does not acknowledge the science behind global warming would come up with a budget that continues a commitment to supporting the fossil fuel industry, even if the budget cuts 23% from the fossil energy office. But when you look at the other cuts to the on the renewable energy side, either total elimination of programs or cuts along the vicinity of 86%, this isn't really going in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. In the year since you testified to this committee, California and New Mexico have joined Hawaii in requiring the states to get 100% of their electricity from carbon-free resources by 2045. What Hawaii and other states need is a federal partner to work with states and businesses to solve the challenges involved in transitioning to 100% clean power. If Congress provides more funding for renewable energy and energy efficiency than what you've put in the budget, will you commit to supporting the states' efforts to transition to 100% carbon-free energy?
Senator, you know.
Yes would be a good answer.
I'm sorry. Go
ahead.
I apologize. Senator, you go ahead.
No, I would just like a yes answer from you for that.
No.
I long
I know
for
what
a yes
I know what your yes answer, your answer you're looking for. Having been a former governor, you know I'm very supportive of states, by and large, making their own decisions about what direction they want to go, and I'm certainly going to respect that with those three states. Texas may have a different idea about which direction they want to go, and I'm going to respect that as well. But let me just say that I'm going to follow the lead of this committee from the standpoint of what you find as your funding priorities. We will take those dollars and we will spend them as efficiently and effectively as we can, and hopefully you as a whole will say that we followed your directions.
That sounds like if we give you more money on the renewable side, that you will work with the states to enable them to get to their goals. That's what it sounds like to me. So is that accurate? Yes. Okay, going on to ARPA-E. ARPA-E, as you well know, is an innovative research model at DOE that has demonstrated remarkable success in a short lifespan. But once again, the administration is proposing eliminating ARPA-E, an idea Congress has rejected the past 2 years. Will you commit to dispersing funds to eligible ARPA-E projects within a reasonable time, consistent with past practices, and not withhold congressionally appropriated funds? Mr. Secretary?
I'm sorry. I'm
Okay, so
I'm having a hard time hearing you, Senator. I apologize. I know we're on ARPA-E.
yes, the administration wants to eliminate the program, but there is already appropriated amounts in this program. And my question to you is whether you would commit to dispersing the funds to eligible ARPA-E projects within a reasonable time, consistent with past practice. Good. Thank you. Getting back to renewable energy. For the third time in a row, the budget proposal goes in the wrong direction by slashing renewable energy and energy efficiency, this time with cuts of $2 billion or 85.6% from the levels set last year when Republicans controlled both chambers of Congress. This year's budget for the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Office, EERE, includes $353 million that Congress already gave EERE last year, but that DOE has not yet awarded at the time the budget was being put together late last year. But the EER office, as Congress intended, has continued to allocate the funds to support energy efficiency and renewable energy research and development. So if Congress actually followed your recommendations, EER would not only face a drastically smaller budget going forward, but would also have to cancel funding already announced to support renewable energy and efficiency research and development. Isn't that correct? You'd actually have to cancel the funding if we went along with your budget.
Senator, again, I kind of get the process here, and I'm, you know, this isn't a take it or leave it budget that we've obviously laid out here in front of you, and we're going to work with this committee. So I'm going to tell you that the dollars that we have been placing out in the field are making a difference now. We just announced the largest solar funding opportunity in the history of the department just this week. $130 million in a new research and advanced early stage solar technology. So I recognize the conflict between the budget that's laid out, but I know what reality is. And between 2016 and 2018, solar generation in this country increased by almost 90%. And we also saw wind energy this coming year surpassing hydro for the first time in history. So there's actually some pretty positive stories, Senator, that's ongoing, and a substantial amount of that because of innovation that has come out of the Department of Energy. We're going to continue to doing that. And most importantly, I think, for you, is that you appropriate these dollars, and we're going to spend them as efficiently and effectively as we can to meet the directions that this committee and Congress gives us.
Madam Chair, there will be consequences if they have to cancel funding that's already been passed and announced by the DOE. I don't know that the department has figured out what the consequences would be, but there will be some. Thank you.
Senator, just for the record, any program, any project that we have committed to, we got to finish the funding for it. So I'm pretty sure that's statute.
It's the way we want it to be. Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your time and testimony today and your service to the country. I think I appreciated the statement you just made. This is not a take it or leave it budget, I think, is what you said to Senator Rono, and I think you also talked about being able to work with Congress with whatever is budgeted that Congress passes, the appropriations bills we move forward, that you will use those dollars appropriately, responsibly, and according to the law. And with that in mind, I think just wanted to highlight the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Colorado. Estimated in 2017, the economic impact of more than $1.1 billion nationwide for Colorado's economy. That was about $750 million of economic impact. So obviously the Office of Energy Efficiency, Renewable Energy, which is NREL's steward and primary funder, is a very important component for Colorado. And I think you've given me the assurance through the answers to others, but I would just like to hear it. You'll execute the budget Congress provides you, and you can continue to see these good, so that we can continue to see these good returns on federal research investment, as evidenced by this University of Colorado report that showed that $1.1 billion economic impact.
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, I think this budget actually includes an increase for NREL's facilities that you speak of.
Yeah, and we're going to continue the push on NREL and others because, as you know, you and I had the chance to visit NREL. We had a great visit of the lab there. I think we painted some solar panels, which was pretty incredible. And congratulations to you on visiting all 17 national laboratories last year. We had a great employee visit, town hall with the NREL staff and staff members. In your testimony, you talked about the work that NREL does and other labs do, the core research of these facilities. Could you talk a little bit more about your plans for NREL Flatirons campus for megawatt scale grid integration testing and cybersecurity?
Well, that's obviously, there's a number of things that come together here. Obviously, the innovation that's coming out of labs like NREL with new technologies from the standpoint of the Senator made reference to literally painting on to the surface of the top of a vehicle, for instance, a solar cell, for lack of a better descriptive term.
Yeah, process. Yeah.
But the AI side of this, I think it's one of the things, Senator Heinrich, that we have the potential to change literally the world in these labs and the work that they do together. Our high-performance computing, our exascale computing, and hopefully very near in the future, the quantum computing capacity, argon We were up at Oregon 2 weeks ago, a computer there that does 1 billion transactions per second, a quintillion. I mean, that's the power of what we're having the ability to do. So a lot of answers to questions on issues like energy, on emissions, on some things that really vex us today. We're going to have the potential to get answers to those in the not too distant future. And that's one of the exciting things about why focusing and frankly having the flexibility to move these dollars around in the DOE budget is so important. So.
In your testimony, you also touched on the importance of energy storage, advancing energy storage through the Advanced Energy Storage Initiative, including the grid storage launchpad and supporting the research at the National Labs system itself. So I'm not going to ask a question on this because I want to get to a different question, but I want to continue to work with you on ways that we can increase research opportunities to help decrease the cost of energy storage. So that's important to us.
It's the Holy Grail.
Yeah, it is. And finally, I just wanted to talk about a bill that I've introduced to extend the life of the Grand Junction disposal cell. This is a particular issue in the Western Slope. This is a mill tailings disposal site in Grand Junction, Colorado, that can store as much as 230,000 cubic yards of additional material. So the reason this is important, from 1950 to 1966, mill tailings, which were predominantly sandy material in this area, were available to private citizens and contractors who used them as fill material, building roads, concrete, and mortar in this area of Colorado. So the radioactive mill tailings, of course, were then hauled to more than 4,000 private and commercial properties in Grand Junction area. It wasn't until later that the federal government realized this was not a very good idea and it was hazardous to people's health. So we created this disposal cell site. Can you talk about what steps DOE will have to start taking this year if the site's lifespan isn't expanded by Congress?
Well, obviously, current law, the site's going to stop receiving material on September the 30th, 2023. Obviously, unless reauthorized Congress, or reauthorized by Congress, this initial closure will have to begin as early as this year. So you need to, thank you for bringing it up. I mean, this is a timely issue.
These are tailings that wouldn't be properly disposed of, that would be
Correct.
remaining on people's property that, yeah.
And, I mean, from a building construction standpoint, this could really be have a negative impact on sites. You know, there are alternative location disposal sites in Utah and Texas, but this one that you speak about is really important for your part of the world. Anyway, we stand ready to work with you to find a solution on it, Senator.
Thanks, Mr. Secretary. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Gardner. Senator Manchin, you want to take your
I'm
turn?
going to defer to Senator Heinrich. I've got a lot of busy people on my side.
All right, all right. Senator
Thank you.
Heinrich.
Thank you both. Secretary, I was watching the President speak about energy last week, and I learned something new. He said that if it doesn't blow, you can forget about television for that night. And I thought, given your experience as governor of Texas, where ERCOT has such high levels of penetration of wind energy in particular, that you might have some expertise in how you manage all of those angry constituents when their TVs don't work. How did you pull that off?
I didn't have an issue with that.
So you had wind penetration levels well above 30%, going on 40%. You didn't have people calling up your office
Well, you
complaining
got to remember,
television?
Texas is a pretty big state, sir.
Okay. You might want to share that perspective with the guy, the big boss in the White House.
Absolutely.
We have similar experience in New Mexico. We don't have quite the level of generation, but we're going on 2 gigawatts and we're still growing, and everybody's TVs seem to be working just fine. I want to ask you about, I'm sure you're familiar with Urenco USA's nuclear enrichment facility that's just inside New Mexico on the New Mexico-Texas border. They've been up and running since 2010. They're currently meeting more than a third of the U.S. demand for utilities, for enriched uranium by utilities. And why I bring this up is because in your budget, there is well over $100 million to demonstrate a domestic enrichment technology through a sole source contract for what effectively already exists in the private sector. Why should taxpayers be on the hook for a single dollar for something that's already up and running in the private sector?
Senator, I'll see if I can get this as, as simplistic as I can, because for my purposes, it is relatively straightforward. The company I think that you make reference to, and this is in your home state?
Centrus is, Urenco is in New Mexico.
Right.
I think Centrus
That company is not a United States-owned company, and that is the real key here. We need a domestic supply of this high-assay uranium product if we're going to have a fuel for advanced reactors. And I think, I hope all of us are very much in favor of having these advanced reactors.
But why would you have that require? Commercial reactors don't require that requirement.
Senator, I'm just telling you that's what
supplying reactors all over the United States. How is it different if you have a small modular reactor, a pedal bed reactor? How is that different than all of the other second generation nuclear generation technology?
Yes, sir, and it has to do with the Department of Defense requirement and to restore that market. So, I think there's a clear understanding when you're talking about something as sensitive as a DOD related type of a reactor that you want that to be.
Are you talking about DOD reactors, or are we talking about private sector next generation reactors?
I'm talking about what they're doing with the advanced reactors may have a clear DOD nexus.
What's that look like?
I'm not sure we can.
But it's clear.
Huh?
U.S. domestic source for market.
Yep.
Yep.
For DOD.
Well, in general. But DOD as on basis is where they're looking at doing it.
Yep. I don't know whether we can talk about it here.
That's convenient. All right, let's shift gears.
I would invite you to come to
to
sit down in one of our secured skiffs and have the conversation about DOD's requirement on
happy to do that.
fuels.
You were at Sarah Week in Houston, and you said that you had thrown a lot of Jell-O at the wall, trying to find some way to subsidize aging, uneconomical coal generation. You had a study, you proposed a FERC order, and an emergency declaration. All of those have sort of gone by the wayside now. Are we done trying to prop up generation that is no longer economical in the current
Well, here's
wholesale
what
market?
I would tell you, Senator. If if the American people want to have one or two sources of energy, that's what they're going to rely upon. We have been blessed to have.
It seems like we have more sources and higher reliability than we've ever had in our nation's history. So isn't this a little bit of a solution in search of a problem?
No, sir. What it is, I think, is what's called leadership. It's about having a plan in place in case there are some things that happen. We can have the defense of this country on the cheap if you want it.
I would suggest it's not about leadership, that it's about picking winners and losers.
Best I can tell, government picks winners and losers every day, sir. We certainly did it.
But we have a wholesale market that can do that based on the private sector.
Yes,
shouldn't we let it work?
And when the lights go out in Dallas, Texas, because you haven't put the right mix in, I know who gets blamed for that. And it's the leadership of your state, it's the leadership of your country. And I think that's the point that the President's making, is that we need an all-of-the-above energy strategy in this country. You bet. We are blessed with natural gas right now, and we love it. The state of Texas in particularly likes that. But when you are blocking natural gas pipelines going to the Northeast, when you are literally limiting in Westchester County, New York, new gas hookups because of the limitations that states are making on that type, maybe it's time for us to have a conversation in this country. Do we need to have a stable
base load of energy, and those are things that are uninterruptible. And the best I can tell, the only things that are uninterruptible in the energy industry are coal and nuclear and hydro.
I'll leave you with one last thing. There are many coal-fired generating stations operating well below 40% capacity factors. That doesn't sound like base load to me.
Let's go to Senator Brasso.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Secretary, great to be with you again, and you and I have discussed in the past, I'll bring up again today, my opposition to the Department's practice in the past of bartering excess uranium to fund the cleanup and decommissioning of the Portsmouth gaseous diffusion plant. GAO has repeatedly said that the barters are illegal. The barters have also contributed to record low uranium prices and put uranium producers in Wyoming and other states out of work. In 2018, U.S. uranium production was at its lowest level in the United States since 1950. Last year, I received your commitment to suspend the Department's uranium barter because the Department's practices were illegal and harmful to our domestic uranium producers. So I just asked Mr. Secretary, can you again commit to suspending the Department's uranium barters and agree to working with Congress to fully fund the Portsmouth cleanup costs with congressional appropriations?
Senator Brasso, I agree with you that I think I used the term, it's a pretty poor way to run a railroad. And I still agree that the Congress needs to directly appropriate the money for Portsmouth and get out of the barter business.
You know, uranium plays such a vital role in maintaining America's national security. It powers nearly a quarter of the U.S. Navy's fleet. It keeps the lights on in around 20% of American homes and businesses. State-owned and state-subsidized uranium producers, though, in Russia, in Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan, they're using unfair trade practices to flood the U.S. with uranium to the detriment of producers in Wyoming and across the country. Based on industry projections for 2019, American uranium producers estimate that they will supply less than 1% of American nuclear fuel. If this trend continues, we're likely to find ourselves wholly reliant on foreign suppliers of this critical element. Last July, the Department of Commerce launched a Section 232 investigation into whether uranium imports threaten to impair U.S. national security. The investigation is wrapping up, and Secretary Ross will soon be delivering the findings of that investigation to the President. So then I ask you, Mr. Secretary, do you believe that maintaining uranium production in the U.S. is critical to our national security?
Yes, sir, is the point I was making to Senator Heinrich.
And have you and your staff urged the Department of Commerce to take meaningful action to address Russia and Kazakhstan's unfair trade practices?
We try to relay to all of the agencies of government, remind them the key role that the nuclear energy industry continues to play in our country, as well as the key challenges that we have. It is a very vital sector, and whether it's the infrastructure of the nuclear energy side of things, the market valuation perspective that occurs, and that keeping that as a stable and viable entity is important in a number of areas. It's not just on the civil nuclear side, sir, but it's also on our ability to keep a trained workforce and a supply line on our ability to keep this country free with our nuclear enterprise.
Well, as we're here discussing this upstairs, I'm chairing a hearing of the Environment and Public Works Committee where we're visiting with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, all 5 members, and the issue that you just raised about the importance of a stable workforce is key to our agenda that we're discussing as well upstairs.
Thank you, sir.
Do you know if you or anyone on your staff has had a chance to specifically speak with the Department of Commerce with regard to our concerns with the Section 232 investigations and where they're coming?
Yes, sir, we have in the appropriate ways.
Thank you very much. You know, emerging technologies such as carbon capture, using that carbon, storing it, using it productively, these have all been potential we have to reduce carbon emissions while allowing for the use of the affordable, abundant sources of energy such as coal. If we can commercialize these technologies, we can protect the environment, we can ensure that coal plants remain in service and competitive in energy markets. You know, a recent report noted the increase in the construction of coal generation facilities in China. Last year, Chinese coal-fired power plant capacity under construction, just under construction, increased 12%. It's important that we develop and deploy effective carbon capture technologies for use by growing economies. So I appreciate your department's support of carbon capture, utilization, sequestration technologies. So, Mr. Secretary, can I count on your continued support of the development and deployment of these carbon capture, utilization, sequestration technologies in the next fiscal year?
Yes, sir. Senator, prior to you coming in, we talked about some of the projects that we're funding now. There was a FOA, $30 million that's gone out to on carbon storage, assurance facility enterprise, and then there was another $30 million on front-end engineering and design of carbon capture systems. So not only do you have that commitment, we're sending dollars out the door to do that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thanks, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Barrasso. Senator Manchin.
I'm going to take a shot myself this time.
All right.
First of all, I want to thank you, Secretary, for being here as always and being candid where you're coming from and how we can work with you. Dr. Birol, the IEA, International Energy Agency, the head of that, basically talked about carbon capture sequestration. Everyone has a different opinion on fossil, whether we should have it or not have it. The reality of what we're dealing with in the world is it's going to be used for quite some time because of the age of the plants. They're not going to time them plants out in Asia anytime soon. We're decreasing our amount of dependency on fossil. We see that, except we're increasing our demand for natural gas. My state of West Virginia, like your state of Texas, we have an ocean of energy under us, so we're blessed both ways. But with that, carbon capture sequestration is something he said, if you want to decarbon, if you want to really help the planet and you want to help global climate, you better find a way to capture carbon. So we're looking at a moonshot type of mentality. What type of a cost is that? We have people putting different types of costs. We have some people wanting to talk about we should put a carbon fee, and that's going to fix the problem. A carbon fee that goes to dividends that's dispersed out among the populace does not fix the carbon problem. If you care about the climate and you want to fix it, you better find out how just eliminating using fossil is not going to work around the world. And he has told us that basically if we eliminated the use of fossil for energy in the United States of America, it's going to make a blip on the radar screen compared to what Asia's doing for the next 30 or 40 years. So we've got to come to that reality. What would it take, and are you committed, you have the same feeling of that? If you all talk to Dr. Birol, what's going on and the amount of demand for energy? Because the 2.3% increase has all been just about fossil. It's been an increase of demand of energy, and meeting that demand has been through fossil more than anything else in other parts of the world, which most of the demand's coming from.
Senator, we, at the department, we agree by and large with your assessment that I think by 2040, 70% of the energy developed in the world will still come from fossil fuels. America has always been the place where innovation has come from, and unless we kneecap ourselves and by taking our ability to create the wealth that pays for the innovation, American innovation will continue to be where people look, where we take and push out our ideas. When we're working with our Indian friends, I was in India last year, and we talked to them about our technology going over there, both CCUS, LNG, all of those, the project that we went and looked at in Morgantown, right outside of Morgantown, West Virginia, on the
coal-fired plant that was basically that was burning with extreme heat.
Healy plant there, the low emission, highly efficient low emission plant there, pulverizing the coal and incredibly clean technology. That's what the world needs to see. We need to be able to deliver that type of technology. And, there may be some projects going on in different places around the world. I don't see it. As Germany is transitioning away from, both nuclear power and shutting down coal plants, or that was their goal, they've actually increased their emissions, while the United States is lowering their emissions. And we're lowering our emissions partly because of innovation, partly because of our transition to LNG. So
I want to.
we can help the world get there, but if we put ourselves at a competitive disadvantage from an economic standpoint, we'll never be able to.
Well, my thing is saying is that basically if you really want to fix the problem, the way we did with the Clean Air Act back in the 80s and 90s, we made the people that were emitting the particulates basically responsible for cleaning it up and fixing the new technology. I think the same is going to take here. For every $1 of a carbon fee that's been recommended, that would produce $5 billion in revenue. $1 of carbon fee is $5 billion. Because they're saying a $40 fee is $200 billion, that's $5 billion. I don't know what it's going to take for a moonshot to get people, and quicker than, sooner than later, but we've got to do something that fixes the problem, not basically exasperates the problem because turning your head. I want to go real quick. You and I have talked about a Category 5 hurricane coming up the Houston Channel, what it could do to devastate our energy production for the United States of America, because most of it is in that corridor. And you and I have talked also, Mr. Secretary, about potential for having a diversification in the Mid-Atlantic region where we have an abundance of propane and ethane. We have an abundance of natural gas coming from Marcellus and Utica. Rogersville is going to come on strong. So what I would say is, are you, to ensure that we have a resiliency and a redundancy built into the to our natural gas liquid sector in the event Gulf Coast would get hit, are you all looking at that seriously, advancing that as quickly as we possibly can to have that backup for security, and how does it play into the national security of our country?
Senator, you and I have talked about this at length, and frankly, it's not happening as fast as I'd like to see it, because I think there is a extraordinary potential in those 4 states in the Appalachian region, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio, sitting on top of the Utica and on top of the Marcellus. I mean, just amazing
we got a deeper one, too. We got Rogersville we just found.
And I think it's Shell's building a big cracker plant just north of you. PTT has a plant that is still waiting on their final investment decision to be made, but I think that's going to happen. So
we're talking about the storage hub. You know, the storage hub we talked about, because we've got to keep that wet product. Yes, and I have other countries coming at us so strong and so hard, speaking of Russia and China, that wants to buy every ounce of ethane and propane, take the wet properties out of the jurisdiction of the United States of America.
And adding value to that gas, the jobs that get created, and great points you make about having a duplication of the petrochemical footprint in this country in case there is a Category 5 hurricane up the Houston Ship Channel and it knocks that out for some period of time. You have an alternative there. This is a win-win for America. This is about American energy security. It's about American jobs. And, you know, I hope we collectively, the administration, Congress, Democrats, Republicans, both look at this and go, this makes sense for America. It's the type of infrastructure we need to build.
We need your help, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Manchin. Senator Daines.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Perry, good to have you here. I want to thank you for your common sense, balanced approach as we think about America's energy portfolio going forward. I want to look at the budget for the fossil energy research and development. Your budget called for a 24% reduction in that budget. This office had funded a groundbreaking, the Petronova plant in your home state of Texas. And I want to compliment Texas, by the way, of being a great example of an all-the-above energy state and what you do there and did as governor in Texas. More recently, Congress has previously funded this office in a significant way, and I hope we can do that again. I also want to make sure that money is spent where it's needed most. As we've spoken before, Mr. Secretary, the coal strip power plant in Montana is one of the largest coal-fired plants west of the Mississippi. It's one of the largest economic drivers in Montana, and it's very well suited for DOE investment. Over 2,000 megawatts of power, 350 highly paid workers there, annual payroll $52 million. $104 million paid in state and local taxes. I can tell you that is a big number as we look at the revenue streams in the state of Montana. And we noticed this winter, now we had a really cold February and an unusually cold March, It was 40 below one morning. It was a Monday morning in March, and I was trying to fly back to Washington, D.C. out of Bozeman. De-icing fluid doesn't work when it gets to 25 below or colder. We were sitting for 2.5 hours waiting for the temperature to warm up to minus 25. It was interesting to see what happened on the grid in Montana when we were hitting this cold snap. I can tell you without certainty, if we did not have the Colstrip power plant running then, because the wind power had stopped at minus 23 because of issues with the composites and structural challenges, they shut them down at minus 23 or colder. It was the coal-fired plants that kept the lights on for Montana during that cold snap. The challenge, if we lose Colstrip, it's baseload power. We risk hardworking jobs that Boilermakers have, miners, other laborers who call our beautiful state home. And Mr. Secretary, we are a state that still relies on hardworking Montanans where moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas can go down to Walmart and buy an elk tag over the counter for 20 bucks. Yep. The youth tag's $8 if you're 12 to 14 years old, because it's something that all Montanans love to do, or most Montanans do. We want to preserve that. So it's not just the rich and famous that are locking up our state, to a balanced approach to natural resources. 40% of that power flows to Washington State, and Governor Inslee continues to put politics between high-paying jobs in my state, high-paying jobs on the Indian reservations, and affordable baseload electricity. He's pressuring owners to get away from carrying coal-fired electricity, as if electrons knew the difference. While I realize that as Texans are using power from Petronova, Colstrip is still very similar. That plant received over $190 million from DOE. Like Petronova, Colstrip is located near an EOR field that will require pipeline construction for carbon capture to help offset the economic costs of CCUS. And while we are making strides in improving the economics of carbon capture, like the Section 45Q tax credit, I believe the future of this plant demands more investment from your department. With that as background, I'd like to get your thoughts on what you're doing to protect coal plants like Colstrip. It's baseload, it's jobs, it's tax revenue, it's the franchise for Montana right now, Mr. Secretary.
Let me just briefly say that the 2020 budget that is laid out in front of you is not at a level that would support a commercial scale operation for Colstrip that's, as you mentioned, similar to Petronova. And Petronova had received $190 million in stimulus funding from DOE, and that was a $1 billion project, which means the partners provided about an 80% cost share. But we recently released an FOA for carbon capture at power plants. It's a $30 million for FY19. That was directed by Congress, and certainly could be of interest. It's the administration's policy for us to be, DOE, to be focused on these early stage research and development opportunities, and particularly where there's the potential for them to be commercialized and the technology to be demonstrated. So I think you know our commitment to the technology. I think more importantly and a broader, just let me say as I wrap up here quickly, you're absolutely correct that we've got to have a portfolio that is broad in this country. That if we just make decisions about the economics, you know, there are cheaper ways to deliver energy in the country. Right now, we're blessed with an abundance of natural gas, and God, I mean, thank God we've got that. Mm-hmm. But you never want to have that phone call that comes in and says, you know, we got people that are losing their lives in part of the state because we weren't willing to pay for a diversity to make sure that we had an all-of-the-above energy strategy. It would be like saying that we're going to keep America free, but we don't need X numbers of hundreds of thousands of soldiers. We can do it with this many. We really don't need let's just have a 100-ship Navy because, you know, that's cheaper and we can use these dollars for something else. You can keep America free for some period of time on the cheap, but I'm not willing to bet the future of this country on it. And I hope that the people of this country aren't willing to basically say, we're going to have an energy strategy, a national security strategy in this country that's just based on cost.
Thank you. My follow-up just is, could I get your commitment to work with me on ways to accelerate the DOE investment at Colstrip?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Daines. Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you. Hello, Secretary Perry. I guess you know what I'm going to talk to you about. Let me ask you this. In the President's budget, he requests $116 million to restart licensing activities for the proposed Yucca Mountain Nuclear Waste Repository, which would ultimately bring high-level nuclear waste to Nevada.
Okay.
You want me to give you some time to get to where
No,
you
I'm
go?
set now. I'm
Okay.
ready.
And so, as you know, this is something that, for purposes of the state of Nevada, we have been fighting against. We are united from Republican and Democratic governors to our congressional delegation. It is not safe for the storage in Nevada. And the concern we all have is the end run around the science. So let me ask you this, because I think it's still happening. On March 21st, 2019, the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board sent you a report saying they are concerned that the Department of Energy has not adequately addressed the seismic hazards for the Defense Assembly Facility at the Nevada National Security Site, and that a seismically induced high explosive violent reaction could result in unmitigated dose consequences to the off-site public. Predominantly, the report states that DOE has not evaluated the impact of the increased seismic hazard on safety-related structures credited to protect public health and safety during a seismic event at the Nevada National Security Site. In fact, the most recent U.S. Geological Survey taken in this area lists the region to be a moderate to high seismic hazard. So my question to you is, have you taken these seismic hazard reports into consideration as you continue to push to open Yucca Mountain?
Let me respond to your first observation, which is the letter that you make reference to, and we certainly appreciate their input related to the need to update the seismic analysis for the systems and equipment that supports nuclear explosive operations at the device assembly facility.
You have incorporated some analysis into this new seismic activity report that is coming in. We have it every single day coming into University of Nevada, Reno, to show that it is moderate to high seismic activity there. Are you incorporating that into your analysis for reopening Yucca Mountain?
I feel quite certain that we would, Senator.
That you would, or you have not yet?
That we would.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I would like to know is specifically what you're incorporating into your analysis. If you can share that with me, that would be helpful. The next question I have for you is, you may not know this, but a handful of red flag exercises are held at Nellis Air Force Base, which is over the Nevada Test and Training Range, which is in close proximity to Yucca Mountain. The purpose is to give our service members realistic training with real hardware and ammunition. Even former Air Force Secretary Heather Wilson has stated that transportation of nuclear waste near the range could impact testing and training. Do you think it is safe to store waste nearby, even with the threat that errant ordnance or any other mishap near Yucca Mountain could have an extremely negative impact on the neighboring public?
I think it's safe, Senator. As a matter of fact, what I'd like to do
So can I
is,
see your analysis instead of your
invite
opinion?
you to come out. To my
I've been
understanding.
there. I've been there, sir.
You've been to
And
the DAF?
I've been there. And let me just say this. I would like to see your analysis to why you think this is safe when the Secretary of the Air Force does not. And so not only have I been there for the red flag exercises, I've been to Yucca Mountain, I've been to those facilities.
But you've been
so
to
I
the-
would like to
you've
see
been to
some
the
analysis.
device, because what we're talking about here is the, just so that we're clear about what we're talking about, because the Nevada site is a massively big piece of land.
Secretary Perry, I don't have much time, but you don't have to tell me that. I grew up in Las Vegas. I have family and friends who work out there. I've been out there.
But I'm asking you,
So my
Senator,
question to
have
you
you
is,
been to
I
the
would like
DAF?
to sit down and go through this with you and show you why it is not safe, and there are concerns about the safety there. But let me have, and I'm running out of time, let me ask you this. On October 20th, 2018, President Trump told a Reno news station regarding Yucca Mountain, and I quote, I think you should do things where people want them to happen. So I would be very inclined to be against it. That would be Yucca Mountain and opening it. And we will be looking at it very seriously over the next few weeks. And I agree with the people of Nevada who do not want Yucca Mountain to be a long-term permanent repository. So my question to you, does President Trump no longer agree with the people of Nevada when he expressed his opposition to Yucca Mountain?
Senator, what I think we all have to recognize here is that Yucca Mountain is the law, and I'm going to follow the law. I think the President's going to follow the law. His opinion of whether or not the people of Nevada like it or not doesn't have anything to do with what the statute says. And the statute says that we are to continue with the licensing process. We're continued for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to make the decision on whether or not this is a safe site or not. It's not an issue of what someone thinks or what someone
So let me ask you this, Secretary Perry, because I
I'm
hear
gonna
you say
follow
that
the law.
constantly. I hear you say that constantly, even though the previous administration took a different path toward that in the Blue Ribbon Panel, which has been disregarded by this administration. But let me just follow up with this, because you say this constantly. You're just following the law. And I just want to take a moment with respect to this issue,
Very
if you
briefly,
would.
please.
Thank you. Because I think it's important for people to know, and this law was not born out of irrational decision-making. It was intentionally created to do an end run around the science, establish compromise, and public participation, and was created intentionally to disregard Nevada at the expense of other states. And just very briefly, in 1982, the Nuclear Waste Policy Act directed DOE to study many sites and ultimately to construct 2 repositories, first one in the west and then one in the east. It limited the amount of the waste the Western repository would keep to ensure that the Western location would not be the sole facility. By 1990, a second repository site was to be named amongst a short list of 5 other identified locations. However, DOE's list of sites for the second repository drew intense opposition from all of the affected states. And in 1986, the Reagan administration announced a halt to work on a second repository. And when confronted with intense political pressure and high costs, Congress passed the NWPA amendments in 1987, which not only canceled the second repository program, it nullified the creation of a temporary storage facility that was supposed to be placed in Tennessee until after licensing of the final repository, and it statutorily designated Yucca Mountain as the site. Mr. Secretary, historical context is key, and it shows that extreme political influence was used to scapegoat the state of Nevada. All I'm asking is for some reasonable people to come to the table to address this issue and recognize that scientifically this is not safe for Nevada. We need a consent-based siting for everyone to be involved and not use Nevada as a scapegoat. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate
Been very
the indulgence.
generous
Thank
with my
you.
time.
Senator,
Let's go
let
ahead
me
to Senator
just
Wyden.
wrap it up by saying that I hope you and I make the parameter for reasonable people, and I will work with you in any way that I can. And again, I want to offer you the opportunity to come out to the NNSS with me, and let's continue the conversation and put boots on the ground at the site.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Secretary. I want to ask you about 2 matters, primarily Bonneville, but just a quick matter on Hanford, where Senator Cantwell is going to zero in and is very knowledgeable in this area. Y'all are up to 2 things at Hanford. The first is you're looking at taking the high-level radioactive waste, which is the worst stuff, and calling it something less hazardous. And so there's this kind of a name change. And you're adding budget cuts to it. So we got 2 bad things going on up there. Senator Cantwell, as I say, will get into all the details, but I'd just like to ask for purposes of my first point, not a question, but I would like you to provide the committee, particularly Senator Cantwell and myself, an explanation of how the types of budget cuts you're proposing, in addition to this reclassification operation, are going to let you achieve the milestones of the tri-party agreement. This is just yes or no. Will you get me an answer within 10 days on that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Second, I want to get into Bonneville. So you all want to privatize Bonneville. And on this matter, Secretary, I want to give you an opportunity for some candor. You and I have had plenty of differences, but I've always found you to be candid when I've asked you about these kinds of issues. And a little bit ago, one of your Office of Management and Budget people who handles energy issues said that the Trump administration is still going to propose auctioning off Bonneville to the highest bidder. Now, this steals from every man, woman, and child in the Pacific Northwest, our ratepayers, and is particularly bad for the rural areas. In other words, Senator Cantwell in Seattle and myself in Portland, the cities have a lot of opportunities, but these rural areas are just going to be hammered. And privatizing Bonneville would just amount to just garden variety robbery for families in the Northwest, particularly the ones walking on an economic tightrope, balancing the food bill against the fuel bill and the fuel bill against the rent bill. And they're already stretched very, very thin without the administration trying to raise their monthly utility bills. So I would like to give you an opportunity for that kind of peri-candor that we've been able to achieve a little bit from time to time in the office, and give you the chance to take this colossally bad idea off the table this morning, privatizing Bonneville. Because I would just like to walk out of here and say, something meaningful has been achieved this morning for the people that I have the honor to represent in the United States Senate, particularly in the rural areas. I'm heading home for the break, going to have town hall meetings in these rural areas. Mr. Secretary, privatizing Bonneville hits everybody in the Northwest, steals from the families, but for the rural areas, it hits them like a wrecking ball. It just clobbers them. So can we, for purposes of this morning, can we take this colossally bad idea to privatize Bonneville off the table with a little bit of peri-candor, and that you're going to tell us we don't have to have people all up in arms in those rural communities I'm going to be visiting here shortly?
I will be as candid as I can, Senator, and I'll try to replicate my answer from previous questions on this and my past visits to the Hill. My position relative to having been an appropriator and having been a chief executive and how this budget process works is still the same. I will suggest to you that this line item will end up like it's ended up in every previous
freeze frame with that right there. And you're fine with it ending up on the cutting room floor?
Senator, I know how this process works. And the budget process is going to be decided by those of you sitting on that side of the dais. I'm sitting on this side. I'm going to do what you tell me to do. You'll make the decision on whether or not. I'm sure there are a number of places on our budget that you and I may not agree 100% or even 50%. But you're going to make that decision about where the appropriations are going to be. I'm going to...
I'm over my time. We are going to make sure it ends up on the cutting room floor, and I just hope you won't be trying to revive it after we do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. Senator King?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Governor, Secretary, you have a very tough job coming into a hearing like this, defending a budget that I think has some real problems. I think first, and this goes to Senator Wyden's question, and you've answered this several times, but I just want to have it absolutely clear. Will you commit to diligently and responsibly administering the budget that is passed for your department by Congress?
Yes, sir, and I hope that the activities and our work that we've done together is a pretty good reflection of that over the last 2 years.
Well, I actually checked on that, and my impression is that that is the case, that you have pursued and funded those programs that were authorized and appropriated by Congress, even though they weren't in the original budget. And I take it your commitment is that you'll continue that policy.
I respect this process, sir.
Thank you. Now, there are some good things in the budget, and I think there's some things that should be recognized. One is an initiative on energy storage. This is one of the most important energy issues that faces this country, and I'm a little concerned I don't have much detail, but I hope that you can supply, perhaps for the record, a little more background about what that intention is, what the funding level will be, because I think that is a very important initiative. The CESER office is a good initiative. I understand that is going to have an increase. The cyber office, I think that's important. Senator Manchin talked about carbon capture. I think that's important. My concern, though, is and I think you understand this. Basically, you've said a couple of things today that indicate that you do. When we cut R&D, when we cut the kind of basic research that really only the Department of Energy can do because it's too early stage for the private sector, we're really hurting this country's future. I wrote down a couple of things you said. Pretty positive stories due to innovations coming out of Department of Energy programs. Yes. So let's not cut the programs that have created those positive stories. The other thing you said is America has always been the place where innovation comes from. And as you well know, the fracking revolution, which is one of the great energy innovations of our lifetimes, came out of, in part, funding from the Department of Energy Research and Development Fund. So I understand that you're constrained by the budget that the administration wants to submit, but please don't diminish your commitment to those R&D programs. That's where the future of this country hangs in the balance, and I think I understand the new initiatives, and I think they're important, but that R&D is important, and I'm sure you recognize it.
Yes, sir. We do, and all the way back to, again, my days as a chief executive in Texas, creating offices that did just that. One of the things that we've done here, recognizing that we have, parameters in the budget that we have, is to be able to do some cross-cutting work, if you will, creating a chief commercialization office at the department to be able to oversee these projects, a technology transfer side of this too. And in my remarks, Senator, I talked about that, I hope I don't get judged, I hope that the agency doesn't get judged just on the amount of money that we spend in the line item, but on the results that we get from that. So, and I know, listen, I'm not Pollyanna here. I understand your concerns about particular line items and the reductions that are there, but I hope that you see in our performance from the last 2 years, whether it's on the renewable side of things, which folks, were concerned about, are you going to be funding these types of programs, that you're seeing those types of efforts, that you're seeing the commitment to and all of the above energy strategy, whether it's CCUS, whether it's wind, whether it's
well, my problem isn't, you can make adjustments, and you're talking about adjustments, but in the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, essentially an 85% cut. That's not a trim. When I put my rat in your trap, I expect him to lose his tail, but not up behind his ears. Yeah. And that kind of cut is, I mean, that just, it doesn't bear out. So that's the area that I hope we can work at. Budgets are policy. And essentially, one of the things this budget says is we're not really interested in R&D and the future of those investments, except in certain areas. So I hope, again, to go back to the very beginning, that you will be diligent and fully responsive to the mandates of this Congress in terms of what the programs are, how they'll be funded, and how they should be administered.
We will, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator King. Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Perry, this
Ready to go.
I'm letting you get to your tab there.
I'm there. I'm on you.
Well, this hearing is interesting this morning because obviously you're responding to this overall budget. And many of my colleagues have, different viewpoints on the president's proposed budget. And you, as a skillful ex-governor, now Secretary of Energy, are coming here and basically telling us, don't worry, I get it. Like, you guys are going to write a budget and you're going to have your day. I guess the challenge with all of that is that I think we live in a new world where getting consensus is the best way to move forward. I didn't coin that, somebody else did. Basically, that in an economy where there's so much innovation and information, those people move ahead where they get around a table and get consensus around that science and information. The reason why I'm asking you that is because when the people out at Hanford did the budget and said this is what it takes to comply with the tri-party agreement, they came up with numbers that then the administration is ignoring. And so I'm just trying to understand, if we're going to move forward on science and information, how can we have our own people out at Hanford come up with a number? I think the river protection compliance budget was 1.8 billion, and the president's budget proposal only has 1.4. The Richland office compliance budget was 1.3, and the president's budget came up with 708. So the people on the ground who are working for you are putting numbers on the table, and then the administration or someone is making a decision that's different than that. And these are the people who have to meet the milestones of compliance. Now, I know you've heard me say many times here, and I truly believe it. I'm ready for an energy secretary for life or until Hanford is cleaned up.
Yeah.
Why? Because I think every single energy secretary gets in your slot. They basically have to deal with the White House, and they look at the Hanford budget and they think, oh my gosh, it's in the billions of dollars. We can't possibly do that. I can come up with a better way and I can figure out how to get it done. And I guarantee you every one of those energy secretaries and White Houses have been thwarted on that. Why? Because it's the largest cleanup site in the entire world. The complexity is off the charts. But that is what it's going to take to live up to our responsibility, having people scrub the numbers in the local community and submit them. And so I'm just asking kind of the same question a lot of my colleagues are asking, is like, how do we get around a table and get consensus on numbers that we all believe in, as opposed to this continued, back and forth? And I get it. I get what you're saying.
Yep.
You're skillful at saying it. You're skillful at saying, yeah, I get it. Congress will end up writing this budget. But in the meantime, we actually have a legal document in the tri-party agreement that we have to live up to. And we ask the people in the community, what does it take to live up to it? And their numbers are very, very different than what you and the White House are proposing. So I'm just asking, how do we get on the same page here?
Yeah. Senator, you bring up a really interesting, and by the way, I'm not going to be Secretary of Energy for life. Let me kind of go on the record.
That was a softball. That was a
And,
softball.
Here's what really concerns me, is that we went back, and the previous administration, the best I can tell, didn't give you or this committee or this Congress or, the previous 7, 8 years worth of Congresses, the updated numbers on what Hanford was going to cost. We just got those for you. And those are stunning numbers. I mean, they are, and so my point, Senator, is that, and you got every right to be really upset that you haven't been given the right numbers on what's this really going to cost.
I think the local community did. I'm saying that the
But I'm telling you,
administration is now saying they don't believe that's what it takes to meet compliance. And so, unlike my colleagues, I'm not exactly, here with an emphatic voice. Why? Because I know the voice of experience. I've sat here with energy secretary after energy secretary, and I do know the outcome. I know the outcome, and I know that in the end we will prevail. But what I don't like about this is this we got to get on the same page, because I guarantee you, Hanford is never going to be done on the cheap. Never. It's just not. And it's complex, and we got to get, okay, just because my time has expired, I don't want to use everybody's time. On the quantum issue, if you could just think about this. Obviously, the Chinese competition is so great. We, I think, authorized $1.2 billion. Your budget has money for one center. We were just out in Seattle with some of your team on a conference on this, and the one thing that struck me is that if you want to keep competitive, there's various aspects of quantum. There's the chemistry side, there's the algorithm side, there's material side. So I'm just saying, I don't know if you can do our competitive aspect on quantum with just one center of excellence. And I hope, as this committee envisioned, we'd have many centers of excellence that DOE would think about that and go back to what it's going to take for us to catch up on this
I think
issue.
you're correct, Senator, and let's spend
Thank
some
you.
time talking about.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell. And I know that with the push that we've made here in the committee on quantum and the priority that you're making it, I understand that there is more that's coming out for research on computing software out of Department of Energy. I don't know if you have any updates that you want to share on that, but know that that is something that we certainly support.
Yeah, we were just at Argonne 3 weeks ago, basically announcing the computer that will be named Aurora, and I think I mentioned to the committee the speed of that is a billion acts per second, and gets us that's the first exascale computer in I think 2021. It comes on board in 2021. So the U.S. has #1 fastest in Oak Ridge, #2 fastest out at Lawrence Livermore, and when this computer comes on board, it will take that #1 spot. So with all of that said, if we think for a moment that the Chinese are taking a pass here, we are very mistaken. We'll need to be spending substantial amounts of money and watching our technology very closely as they try to collect it and use it to get back in the lead and quantum, or get in the lead in exascale en route to quantum computing.
Well, Mr. Secretary, I know you have repeated numerous times throughout the course of this morning's hearing that you know how this budget process works, that we on the committee have a very significant role in helping further define legislative priorities, not only on this committee, but in the other committee, which several of us serve on appropriations for energy and water, and helping to facilitate that. So I do hope that you have heard very clearly some of the priorities that have been outlined here.
Indeed.
Whether it is Senator Cantwell's effort on the cleanup at Hanford, something that she has repeated year after year after year, whether it is the need to ensure that ARPA-E continues to do its good work, the efforts within the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. There's good, strong support here for that. Support for the national labs. I have just introduced, along with many on this committee, legislation that relates to nuclear and our advanced nuclear power. This is our NELA bill. We're certainly hoping that within the department we'll have many of your fine team helping us as we seek to regain leadership, global leadership when it comes to nuclear technologies and really that nuclear workforce. I mentioned in my opening the weatherization and the state programs, again, as priorities. Indian energy, many have mentioned energy storage, the quantum initiative, the nuclear waste policy. So I think your folks and you have clearly heard where some of our priorities are in this area. and know that we will continue to work with you to help advance that. Senator Manchin?
One quick, and I know the Senator King has one more too. I just want to clarify, Mr. Secretary, the budget that we have in front of us is one that needs to be worked, as you know, and both bipartisan, Democrat and Republicans have concerns. You've been great to work with. Your office has been great to work with. We all acknowledge that. You will continue, because right now the signal being sent from this budget, as I think the Senator King will mention also, and Senator and Chairman Kelsey has mentioned, that it gives them a lot of concern, consternation, whether it be the low-hanging fruit is energy efficiency. That's a low-hanging fruit. I've had thousands of homes in West Virginia benefit, 200 jobs are associated with it. They think that's going away. I want to make sure that we reassure this is a program and process and work. You will continue administering what you have until you have a direction from Congress of how that spending will work out in your budget process. So there's no need for alarm right now. Should we send that signal that all is well and stable and we're on course?
Yes, sir. I would suggest that, I hope we're sending the same signal that we sent a year ago.
Yeah.
That, sometimes sometimes you support a particular line item with a lot more zeal than you do another one.
I got it.
But
That is very politically correct.
More importantly, we are going to be open to, all the members as they lay out their concerns about the budget. And at the end of the process, we will take your directions and with as efficient and as responsible way as we can is to deliver on that. Obviously, staying within the statutory requirements of the law.
We appreciate that. Senator Hoeven, we're just wrapping up, but Senator King, if you wanted to have a final comment, and then we'll let Senator Hoeven wrap.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick suggestion on quantum. I sit on a couple of other committees dealing with national security. There are lots of people in the United States government working on quantum, the intelligence agencies, the Defense Department. I have a suggestion. You might convene a quantum council to be sure that there is a high level of coordination, and so we're not duplicating, because this is expensive and important work. So
absolutely.
To the extent you can appoint yourself quantum czar to bring together
I appreciate your confidence. There may be somebody even substantially better to do that, but I'm pretty good about getting people together.
Well, you understand the point.
Absolutely.
You can perform a convening function, and I think it's important because this is a major initiative of the United States government that's taking place, I know, in 3 or 4 or 5 different places and probably others. I hope you can look into that.
We have 3 national labs that focus on that now, but you're absolutely
But there are other
correct.
people,
NSA, DOD, DARPA, all of the other agencies of government out there that
Let's
have
get them in the same room every
interest
now, just occasionally, a quarter perhaps, to talk about, okay, what are you doing, so that we're
good
not
idea, sir.
duplicating. Thank you.
We're on it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Senator King, I think the quantum initiative legislation that we passed has some of what you are talking about. I don't think it designates a quantum czar, though, so we'll have to go back and take a look at that. But Senator Hoeven, we've had a good exchange with the Secretary here.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate it. Governor, good to see you.
There you go.
You're
Howdy.
looking well.
How's Mikey?
Doing good. Doing good. How's Anita?
She's really good. Thank you.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks for all you're doing. Say, this time of year, it starts to get pretty warm in the Virginia, D.C. area, and it gets pretty hot down in Texas. But a nice, cool place to go this time of year, where they just have great weather as well as fabulous people, is my home state of North Dakota.
I thought this was another invitation to the Arctic. I just teed him up for that.
Exactly.
So.
See, I mean, we have a great chairman, thinks the right way about things. And so on your way up to Alaska, you'd want to stop in North Dakota. And we had you out there, and of course you did a great job. You saw some of the things we're doing out there, but we didn't get you over to Grand Forks to the Energy and Environmental Research Center, which you need to see because they're doing amazing stuff. And it's something that is near and dear to what you've worked on for a long time, and that's carbon capture and sequestration. And so I've worked on the approach side to make sure that we have research funding, and on this carbon capture and sequestration piece, both for fossil fuels, but also on the renewable side. And so we have projects going on out there, Project Tundra, where, you know, we're capturing it off the coal-fired electric plants, and we've got, like you down in Texas, we got the latest technology in the coal field, and we both have lignite coal. But, you know, we actually have to start capturing and sequestering it, and commercial viability is the key, which is why it's not just the companies putting up money, but the state of North Dakota putting up money, just like state of Texas did, and DOE. And then we also have ethanol plants that are that want to capture CO2 and put it downhole as well, and so they can meet some of the low carbon requirements, like on the West Coast and that kind of thing, for renewable fuel. So we'd love to. First question is, can we get you out there to take a look at this stuff? And anything else you want in oil, gas. You know, we're up to 1.4 million. We're chasing Texas hard. We're up to 1.4 million barrels a day now.
I talked to Governor Burgum yesterday.
I know he was hearing
about some projects and that we can talk about offline, but I mean, just, you guys have some amazing potential there in an all of the above energy strategy with taking the associated gas that's actually restricting some of your crude production now and finding a way to get that sent to the, you know, most likely the West Coast, and I mean, then you put your CCUS into that field. You get the associated gas off. You get the secondary and tertiary push from the CC, you know, the emissions off of that carbon capture. I mean, the energy production in North Dakota can be stunningly powerful for the United States.
Well, it's an economic win, it's an environmental win, and it's a national security win. But we've got to get to commercial viability for the carbon capture. Technologically, we can do it, but we've got to get these projects going. And I want to commend you. You just announced your regional initiative to accelerate carbon capture, $20 million for that project. That's something we'd put in approach. Now you announced the criteria so that folks can come forth and start utilizing it. And then the other one is the Carbon Safe program, Regional Carbon Sequestration, RCSP partnership. So both Project Tundra, which is a group of the latest, greatest coal-fired electric plants, state of North Dakota, and University of North Dakota, EERC, are working on that. So we're not coming to you and saying, hey, fund this. We're coming to you and say, be our partner. And then the same thing on, we're a microcosm of what the country sees as a whole, where we've got to get traditional fossil fuel energy working with the renewable world together. And so these programs involve both biofuel and ethanol, as well as the oil and gas. And so it's the kind of thing where if we can get it done, it's an economic win, it's an environmental win, it's a national security win, and it's the same thing that our country's doing on a macro level. You know, we're trying to crack that code. Same thing with hydraulic fracturing. You know, when I started as governor, we produced less than 100,000 barrels a day. Now it's 1.4 million because we cracked the code on hydraulic fracturing. Same thing in Texas, right? But we need you out there. We need you, because we've been talking about carbon capture and storage, but we're not at commercial viability. When we get commercial viability, we'll have cracked the code, not just for here, but, you know, look at China.
Around the world.
Exactly. So we need you out there. We need you to help us with these. We need to help take that next step from the R&D to commercial viability. And you're the guy, I mean, this is right in your wheelhouse. So we need your help with it.
You just mentioned two projects that we're working on that funded. One of them we're funding. The other one we got a FOA out on it, so on the carbon storage assurance facility. So I think we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
And more importantly, we'll follow your lead, sir.
And obviously we've been working with our chairman and others. Then we've just got to find a way. You know, whether you want traditional energy or renewable energy, we have got to have transportation. We have to have pipelines. We have to have transmission lines. We have to have LNG facilities. We've got to build this stuff. You know, and it's not just stronger or better environmentally, it's safer. We're replacing old infrastructure with the latest, greatest, safest infrastructure. It's a safety issue too.
And Madam Chair, I would be remiss if I didn't remind you that exactly what Senator Hovind's talking about, and getting a full contingent on FERC, and that, of course, will come through your committee. Thank you for all the work that you've done to get our members, but I don't think there's anything more important in light of what you talk about on infrastructure than get a fully functioning Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and getting those permits done and letting Americans get to work and get this product to the world market.
So you'll come.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, and
Yes,
thanks
sir.
for all you're doing. Your leadership.
It's still the coolest job I've ever had, sir.
Yeah, well, you're the right guy to do
Not the
it.
best
We
one, but
appreciate it.
the coolest.
I know what the best one was.
Yeah, I know. Same one you had.
Well, Secretary Perry, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for, as Senator Wyden would put it, your Perry candor, which is appreciated. I understand that sometimes defending the budgets at a time when everybody's looking to make sure that we're making necessary cuts, and sometimes very, very hard cuts, that sometimes specific provisions are really hard to defend, and yet that is your job. So you have been deft this morning, and I appreciate that. But I fully appreciate, again, your reminder to us that you know the drill around here, and we look forward to working directly with you, directly with your team, to help accomplish some of the goals and really significant initiatives where we feel that we can make a difference when it comes to this new energy reality that we've been blessed with here in this country. So thank you for your time and your leadership.
Madam Chair.
With that, we stand adjourned.
He's taking questions out in the hallway, not out down here, so. Coming up.
I'll look forward to meeting you. I really do appreciate this.
Well, I'm not said that when I was at General Motors, you regurgitate that back to like you're not necessarily in your case, but put their list.
Any like timeline or anything like that?
No, we have an introduction
Yeah.
right now. No, we got a lot of work in the committee working with Senator Manchin here to kind of put all the pieces together. You know, we do good and thorough work product
Do you
around
think it would all be
here.
combined into one big package?
Well, not necessarily so. Not necessarily so.